Hey, Dave Spaulding from Handgun Combatives, and we are sitting here on a different deck, coming to you with some thoughts from the deck with Crown Royal. And I've got a kind of a guest commentator with us here today, Rich Nance, Wartac CQC, the host of Handguns and Defensive Weapons. Rich, we just finished the one and only Handgun Combatives instructor class this week. And I thought what we would do is maybe we would take a few minutes to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned, some of the things we saw, because we had a pretty interesting group of people. I mean, we literally had instructor candidates because these people applied. They didn't enroll. They applied in the class and were accepted. But from Boston to San Francisco and from Chicago to Dallas and everywhere in between. Would you give us your thoughts of the class? What'd you think?
I mean, a wide range of students, right? We had a 32-year-old, I think, was the youngest, and the oldest was, what, 60, older than you?
Older than me.
So
that's older than dirt.
A lot of different skill levels, although all were skilled shooters, but some were law enforcement professionals, some military experience, and some just civilian, private citizen shooters, but all at a particular skill level. I mean, you covered a little bit of everything, Dave, as I anticipated you would, from adult learning theory and really how to teach to, of course, the mechanics of running a pistol, and not just from a shooting standpoint, but how to fight with the pistol. And then it all comes down to being able to present that material so that you not only understand it yourself and have a degree of proficiency, but that we as students can pass along your teachings, because let's face it, you're probably not going to do it a lot longer. That's what you keep telling me, and I hope that's not the case, but I know you want to wind down and kind of become a little bit more regional, not be as jet set as you've been for the last decade. But so it's a legacy thing for you, I think, and I think that it's a great thing all the way around. I think everybody benefited tremendously from that week.
Well, it was for me. It is a legacy issue. This is what I did with my adult life. You know, I worked on this, and the first rule I had, as you know, was don't be a dipshit. That was the very first thing.
That was reinforced often in the course.
The very thing. We did not allow any of that kind of assholery to go on during the class. We stopped that stuff right down. Not that it would have happened, but I wanted to nip that in the bud right off the bat, because you were right, Rich. It was about fighting with a handgun. It wasn't about shooting. There's a big difference, folks. When you're fighting with a handgun, it's not shooting. Quite frankly, and you can back me up here, if you're worried about things like how fast your draw is and how quick your splits are and how fast your shot-to-shot reload time is, you're shooting, you're not fighting. And shooting can be its own end result. Shooting is just the first step.
One of the things that we talked about, Dave, is like skills, essentials, right? Reloading, manipulating the trigger properly, all of those things, clearing stoppages, proper form. Those you have to have down to where they're second nature, as you say, to the point of automaticity. I'm not going to be able to say that word right now.
Automaticity.
Automaticity, I almost got it. But that's where you want to be with that. If you're thinking about how do I conduct this reload, what are you not doing? You're not focused on the other things that are important, the other parts that are involved in a fight, but not in a situation where you're simply shooting at a target, right? What's my adversary doing? Is he trying to flank me? Are there more than one assailant potentially? All these things, you can focus on the environment if you have these skills, these kind of hard skills, the essentials, if you have those down pat.
And that's a good point, because we see so often people who are shooters trying to tell people who are fighters to do these ridiculous things like bring the gun up in front of your face and watch the magazine go in and stuff like that. Because I can tell you from personal experience, when someone's in front of you trying to take your life, you're not going to be able to take your eyes off of them. I was in Iraq. At 300 meters, maybe that's the case, but we're talking about room-sized distances. Someone trying to take your life at a distance that you could communicate with them verbally. And that's a big difference right there. And I think people really need to understand that kind of thing. One of the things that jumped out to me this past week is we saw some interesting things occur. And I think they're probably worth discussing. As you well know, I don't differentiate between training with a mini red dot sight and a fixed sight. They're sights. The gun has to get up in front of your face, eye target line, in order to line it up. And people say, oh, well, you know, you've got to get that red dot. You know, well, if you bring the gun up and lock it in, the red dot's there. You shot a mini red dot sight the whole week. Why don't you just go ahead and give us your impressions? Excuse me.
And as you know, Dave, I have a lot more time on traditional iron sights than I do a red dot. But part of the reason I wanted to use that red dot in your course, and in this case I used a Trijicon RMR on my Glock, was because I want to become more proficient at it. I want to be faster with it, and I want to give it a fair assessment. Because if you're only using a piece of equipment occasionally, you're never going to become proficient enough to be able to evaluate it as compared to other pieces of equipment, in this case iron sights. It was real advantageous, like on the 3-round fade back and things like that, when we're shooting at the 25-yard line. Tremendous advantage to have that dot.
Yep.
Because you can see, you can overlay that dot on the target, whereas if you're trying to shoot with traditional sights, the front sight is wider than the target, which can make it difficult.
Sure.
Now up close,
and the entire bottom part of the target is covered by the slide.
Absolutely. Sure. And up close, you and I think, are of the same opinion on this. It's tomato, right?
Yeah,
I mean, inside of 10 yards or whatever, red dot may be easier, may be harder, depending on your experience level, everything else. I will say also that the type of red dot does make a difference. I was shooting the RMR, which we all know is super rugged, super reliable in my experience, but it is a little harder to view from because your view is kind of window.
You've got all that armoring around it, which makes a pretty bold outline on it, and then you've got that recess so people can drop it on it, which is going to make it more difficult to get in that sight TV screen than something that's more open and the borders are thinner.
Correct. Yeah. And as you were saying earlier today, it's amazing that locking your wrist out, that little final portion of locking that out, makes that red dot right where you want it to be. Without that, you're hunting. But once you lock out completely,
you just destroyed my mini red dot sight class.
In that regard, Dave, shooting with the red dot reinforces proper grip and everything else. So I liked it a lot, except for during the torrential downpour.
Came on fast, didn't it?
It did.
We didn't have just a little bit of rain. We had a bucket of rain dumped on us very, very quickly, and it came out of nowhere. And you know, I don't think it's going to be news to any of our viewers that mini red dot sights don't work with a crap in the rain.
It sucked. Trying to shoot 5 rounds in 5 seconds at a thoracic cavity target in the pouring rain from 25 yards. Yeah, good luck with that.
You might as well have been standing in a waterfall.
Well, you keep this in mind. We have water dripping from the brim of our hat onto our sunglasses, which are soaking wet. Now you're looking and you have this window in my RMR, which is soaking wet. Well, you might say, well, just use your iron sights. Well, that doesn't work because my iron sights are in front of the window. I have to see through the window to be able to see my iron sights.
Yeah, and that was another thing we found. When we were like doing one-hand manipulations and stuff like that, that sight being in the front of the RMR made it more difficult to snag on things where to the rear. But people can debate that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's the kind of thing you find out on your own. Another thing I found about the mini red dot sights in the rain is that they're in the holster and they create a little bathtub
getting soaked
for the water to sit in while they're doing it. Right.
When I was looking through the RMR, at one point the water had distorted the reticle. So what I saw was like a red prism, I guess you would be a way to describe it. After I fired that round, boom, then the water had splashed away, and now I had that clearly discernible red dot again. But overall, I was very impressed. The red dot had no malfunctions, no issues whatsoever, except for the environmental issues, which it was good for me to learn that, because you figure out, how is this going to work? We don't always have an opportunity to train in that heavy of a downpour. It was a great experience.
You know, and my concern with the mini red dot sight is different from other people. Most people are concerned about, will it drop top down on concrete, or can you slam it against a wooden barricade and all that? That's not my concern. My concern is those little miniature electronics on the inside of that little case, because those are very similar from unit to unit. And if you ever looked inside one of them, they're pretty fragile. So my concern's that. But, you know, I'm not telling people not to use mini red dot sights. They're in my classes all the time. I would say they're about a third of the time now. Am I sold yet? Not totally, but I am. I am using it.
Water does funny things to equipment, electronic equipment. We had a PAC 2-timer out there the other day that went down.
Yeah.
The rain somehow penetrated. Great timer. I love it. I mean, that's the one I use. But for some reason, that rain got in there just right. I think it was working again after, but it sort of short-circuited for a while.
There's never a timer in a gunfight anyway, so I'm not sure that really matters all that much.
True.
But rain does affect it. You know, it affects the grip. It affects your ability to manipulate. You know, and there's the old saying, if it ain't raining, you ain't training. And, you know, and that's just done to death. And it doesn't make sense, because if you're training, you're trying to learn something new and build skill. Now, you should certainly practice in inclement weather to bolster that training. But let's face it, you're better off to train in the best environmental conditions possible, so that you're focusing on building those skills and not standing there like we were with water running off all of us. So throwing that out there. What else jumped into your mind?
You know, it was just interesting because one of the things we had to do was present a topic for 15 minutes. We had to give a classroom presentation, and the only stipulation I think you had is that it couldn't be firearms or shooting related.
Well, look at it from my point of view. You're there to learn how to instruct the Handgun Combatives method, and some guy comes in and talks about the benefits of the Weaver stance. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So all I said was it couldn't be firearms training related.
Yeah, and that there was people that maybe they're salesmen, and they gave kind of a presentation that was sort of like a sales pitch, something that they're comfortable with, something that they're used to doing. We had one guy who's a very squared away SWAT guy, you know, and so what did he do? He did his on clearing a center fed room. And I think that was probably educational to a lot of people. I mean, it was neat. One guy did it about the Erie Canal.
Erie Canal, gave you the history of the Erie Canal.
It was a hodgepodge of stuff, but what you got to see was how people were able to communicate effectively in a situation where they are nervous because what? They're being graded by you. They're also being evaluated by their peers who at this time they didn't know very well, but they did know that there was some very experienced and very knowledgeable folks in the room, so you don't want to embarrass yourself. I will be the first to say that it's easier to do that type of presentation to a class of students who have paid for your course, and you're speaking about what you know like the back of your hand. Whereas me, I did mine on a topic which is very interesting to me, myelination and skill building, but not a topic that I'm necessarily expert at. And I could tell there was a little bit more nerves going on inside me than typically when I would present something. But I think everybody benefited from that experience, not only the person presenting, but also the rest of the class in watching the person and seeing, are there 57 ums in their presentation? Are they interacting with the class? And I think that stuff is key, because there's a lot of people that may be able to shoot really well. They may be able to fight really well, but I don't know that they can necessarily transmit that information very well to their students.
You just hit on it. It wasn't a shooting class. It was an instructor certification course. What we were looking for in the class was not how well you could draw from the holster and hit and how fast your reload was. We were interested in whether or not you could communicate how to do those skills. You had to lecture, you had to teach a class on the range, you had to demonstrate that skill, and then you had to coach the line, which is what it was all about. I've seen so many instructor certification courses where everybody shows up, they pay their money, they do some shooting, and then they get a certificate. That wasn't what this was about.
And it wasn't also about building range safety officers. I mean, that was a component of it, but a coach is a lot more than a range safety officer. A range safety officer make sure no one moves forward of the line, no one bends down inappropriately, no one points. It's way beyond that. Of course, you have to have that, but you also have to have that element of coaching and recognizing what is it that this person's doing that's affecting their rounds downrange. And as you're quick to point out, and I sometimes fall into this trap also, I'm looking at the target, kind of a target diagnosis type of thing, as opposed to watching the shooter, watching the draw stroke, watching the nuances of the grip, seeing if you can get your finger in there between the heels of the hands. All those things, if they're doing that right, you don't really have to look at the target.
Well, you know what? If you're a true teacher, a firearms teacher, when they're on the line, they shouldn't even be looking at the target. They should be looking at the student. They should be bending down and looking how their hand access the grip. They should be evaluating it. There's so many so-called instructors out there that never look at their foot placement. You know, that's what I wanted. People that are going to teach my program. I wanted them to be good, solid teachers. And I insisted on that, and I wasn't going to let them just get by with slackness. So I was hardcore on that. One of the things that I think jumped out at the class that they did not realize was that the difference between drawing from the side, like 3 o'clock, and the difference from drawing at the appendix carry isn't that much different.
Yeah, because people want to argue that point like it's a polar opposite type of thing.
Here's drawing from the strong side. Here's drawing from appendix. It's a matter of doing this, but a lot of folks want to make it difficult. Oh, wait a minute, this is a whole different thing. No, it's not. No, the arm can only fold so many ways. It can only access the grip so many ways. The fact that it's here instead of here or vice versa doesn't mean that much.
I mean, I carry appendix a lot, and I carry obviously 3 o'clock every day at work.
Mm-hmm.
But I was even a little bit amazed at how similar holstering is from those two positions, because and you were kind of clowning this during the course, but everyone's like holstering appendix.
And they're watching the thing go in there like it's
all you really have to do is bring it back as though you were going to holster it in the 3 o'clock position, and just allow the dust cover to catch on the back of the holster
and rotate it in. I mean, until you're right there. And let's face it, the people that watch it, they put it away and they're like, and they're watching it for 5, 6, 8 seconds. Well, I'm only going to holster when the fight's over. You don't know the fight's over. You may assume it is, but you don't. What people need to do is, if they've got to look, get it in there and get their head back up and see what's going on. Because you don't know the fight is over until someone wearing a badge tells you it's over. So that kind of stuff just drives me crazy, because so much stuff is said on the internet that's anecdotal, and they just hear it, so they recite it, and they don't even know what they're talking about.
No, I thought it was great. I mean, the class, there's so many things to hit on. The drills, and the fact that the drills don't exist in a vacuum, but the drills are to develop particular skills. It's not just, hey, this would be fun to do.
And to what with those skills?
And to, you're going to make me look for that word again.
Chunk them together. Chunk those skills together.
To the point of automaticity. Did I get it?
That's right.
There you go.
Drills reinforce skills. Drills do not exist for their own. I had a young instructor tell me one time, in my one-day course, I got 10 drills. What in the hell is he teaching? I mean, at what point is he teaching the skills if he's got 10 drills? Drills are oftentimes done individually. And it just amazes me how many people are out there charging good money for this stuff and really don't know what they're doing. It's amazing.
Everybody wanted more at the end of that course. Everyone wished it was longer, and I know that you wished it was a little bit longer, just because you feel like you can't cram enough information in there, even though they were long days and we weren't screwing around. I think there was a couple days we didn't really leave for lunch. We stayed there, worked through that. But the question everybody has, I know a lot of people viewing, is there going to be another one? And I know you've said this is the one and only, but I think it went pretty well for you. I think you're pleased with how it went down. I know everybody enjoyed being in the class. What are your thoughts? Are you a firm no, or do you think that you may, in time, do another one of these courses?
Well, it's an interesting question, and you're right. The class did go real well, and now that it's over and we're sitting here and we're relaxed and we're enjoying the evening.
You got the lesson plan all
and
laid
I've
out.
had the opportunity to think about it. I can. No. Any questions?
Tried.
All right, we've been going a pretty long time, and most people don't have this length of an attention span. At about 3 minutes, they're turning it off. So anything else that jumped out in your head? I think I'm proud in the fact that, everybody in the class got certification, but it wasn't handed to anyone.
Not at all. Not at all. I think that I left there a better shooter, a better instructor, and just all around a more competent combatant from 5 days of training. And that's saying a lot, because I've had a lot of other training to get me to this point. So to improve as much as I feel that I have in 5 days is a testament to you and a testament to the course.
Well, Rich, you're not an instructor, but you're a teacher.
Appreciate it.
You impart knowledge, and it was great having you in the class. So, okay, long enough, folks. I know you're probably chomping at the bit to do something else if you haven't already turned it off. So, Dave Spaulding from Handgun Combatives, Rich Nance from Wartac CQC, thanks for checking in.